About the Trump indictment, liberal professor Alan Dershowitz says this is American injustice at its worst.
A Democrat runs for DA. He promises the people of the borough of Manhattan that he will get Trump. They elect him. He then gets Trump on an indictment. And he wants the very same people who voted for him on the theory of get Trump to now serve on the jury to get Trump. My God, how far do you have to go to explain the injustice in this? It should be obvious to everybody. And it has become increasingly obvious to Democrats and progressives and liberals, and people are afraid to say it, but they say it to me and they say it to others. This is American injustice at its worst.
And this is top Donald Trump aide Stephen Miller on what happens when the rule of law is not followed.
The great failure of the conservative movement, Tucker, is its phony belief that words alone will protect us. Look, Iraq has a constitution similar to ours. Countries all around the world have words on paper that are very much the same as ours, fashioned after ours. And those people in those countries have no safety and no liberty and no justice because it is tribe versus tribe, Sunni versus Shia. The words do not protect us. Men of honor and decency and valor protect us. So when you have law schools and you have judges and you have DAs and you have attorney generals who reject the entire Western system of law, the words on the paper mean nothing. They will not protect you. They will not protect your family. They will not protect the country. And unless conservatives and Republicans get serious about understanding the scope and nature of this threat and stop just tweeting about it and memeing about it and talking about it and understand the scope of reaction that will be necessary to reclaim our legal system, then we're not only going to lose this fight, we're going to lose the whole entire country in the process.
And let me suggest something to you. Do you recall Tony Resco? He was a major Obama fundraiser when Obama ran for Senate. Resco was indicted, convicted, and imprisoned on various charges, including extortion. Resco's wife entered into a deal with the Obamas that allowed Obama to purchase land adjacent to his house for less than fair market value. Now, let's suppose some white, enterprising, Obama-hating DA ran promising to get Obama and subsequently indicted him over this real estate deal. The left would scream racism, if not systemic racism. But an enterprising black Manhattan DA, Alvin Bragg, anti-Trumper, runs with a promise to get Trump before one word of testimony has been taken and does, in fact, indict Trump. But no one on the right screams racism, because that's not how Republicans roll. But just imagine the scenario I just described involving Barack Obama. The country would be on fire. My guest served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Detainee Affairs from 2005 to 2007 and is a senior legal fellow and manager of the National Security Law Program at the Heritage Foundation. He is co-author, along with Zach Smith, of Rogue Prosecutors, How Radical Soros Lawyers Are Destroying America's Communities. Please welcome Cully Stimson. Cully, how bad is it?
Larry, it's pretty bad because starting in 2015, George Soros and others started realizing that you needed to change who, quote, occupies the prosecutor office. And they believe that the entire criminal justice system is systemically racist. And that you have to reverse engineer and dismantle the criminal justice system. And they realize that there's 2,300 elected DA offices in the country. These are low visibility, low dollar affairs to run, at least they were. And so they started hand selecting people to run. And the first elected rogue prosecutor that was funded by Soros is Kim Foxx. She's in Chicago. She's still the DA there. And Alvin Bragg is just one of the latest ones. And so they are rogue, and they are doing things like Alvin Bragg issuing indictments, which really don't have a lot of there to it. But it's much worse than most people know about because they just go on and just obey the law.
Before we go over them, on one level, it was ingenious. I mean, nobody paid attention to these races.
Right.
And you said they were low dollar races. All of a sudden, money comes pouring in. They say you can indict a ham sandwich. You can elect a ham sandwich if you're outspending your opponent 10-1.
That's right. And, just like we learned during the pandemic, that who you elect for your local school board really matters in the education of your child. Who you elect for your local county DA affects your public safety privilege. You either live in a safety area or you don't through no fault of your own. And that DA in your town is the gatekeeper to the criminal justice system, not the mayor, not the governor, no one else, the DA. And that's the ingenious aspect of this terrible movement.
And Cully, I think in years past, the assumption was whoever won running for DA would prosecute bad guys.
Right.
And so it wasn't all that much of a big deal. Who knew that there would be a whole cadre of DAs, soft on crime DAs, who don't believe in going after bad guys? Who knew?
Yeah, so Larry, you know, as a former state prosecutor in LA, and I was one too, a local state and federal prosecutor, that the job of the prosecutor is to prosecute. And we have an adversarial nature of a criminal justice system because you want to pit a hard-charging, ethical, good public defender or criminal defense attorney against a hard-charging, ethical prosecutor and let a neutral, detached judge call balls and strikes and a jury of your peers to decide guilt or innocence. But when you destroy one half of that adversarial system and replace the prosecutor, Democrat or Republican is irrelevant, with a pro-criminal, anti-victim zealot, you've just eviscerated the adversarial nature of the criminal justice system, and crime explodes in those cities.
Now, Cully, let's go over all of these. I'm going to give you a name, and you give me a summary, and we'll go down the list. George Gascon, of course, is the DA where I am here in Los Angeles County. He survived 2 recall attempts. He's still there. Tell us about Gascon.
So Gascon is a lawyer, but he's never prosecuted a case. He was the DA in San Francisco for several years before he was succeeded by Chesa Boudin, who was recalled, as you know, thank goodness. And then he was recruited to take on Jackie Lacey, the first black female Democrat head of the largest DA office in the country where you used to work. And the reason they recruited him to go after Jackie Lacey and primary her is because she didn't bend a knee to BLM and she didn't prosecute a police officer for a good shoot. And this is the playbook. And so when he gets into office, he issues wide-scale directives or direct orders to his deputy DAs. And as you know, it's the biggest DA office in the country, so 1,000 lawyers. And the directives included don't prosecute misdemeanors, water down felonies to misdemeanors, don't ask for 3 strikes, even when it's required or even when it's recommended, never ask for the death penalty, never ask for life without parole, don't ask for bail. They set up a whole unit, Larry, that we describe in our book, which will come out in June, to unwind 30 to 40,000 convictions from that office. And they order their prosecutors, get this, order their prosecutors to join in a motion with the public defenders or the defense attorney to let people out of prison after they've served 15 years of a longer sentence. So that's not the job of a prosecutor, and that's why the DA's Association and that office have sued him multiple times.
Larry Elder here. The current administration's policies have continued to wreak havoc on our economy, and it's becoming even more urgent and frightening. And my friends at the Gold and Silver Summit want to help Americans escape this madness. As you know, we're in a severe banking crisis threatening all our financial security. There's no better time to own gold and silver. But what is the best way to do that? If you're considering buying gold or silver, then please attend this free Gold and Silver Summit. At the summit, you'll learn the #1 way to safeguard your wealth using gold and silver and how to bulletproof your retirement by setting up a gold and silver-backed IRA. This is a free event. You will not be sold anything. Instead, attendees can claim a special free gift. And right now, it seems almost every asset class is at risk. And precious metals might be the only safe haven, especially if you want to protect your money from the current administration's economic blunders. Reserve your free spot at the Gold and Silver Summit today at LarryGoldSummit.com and learn how to bulletproof your retirement. Do not miss out on this vital event. Register now for the Gold and Silver Summit. Go to LarryGoldSummit.com. That's LarryGoldSummit.com. He lowered a bunch of categories of crime to non-violent offenses, Cully, including assault on a police officer, serial arson, domestic felony abuse, are now considered to be non-violent offenses, meaning the bad guy gets a far more lenient sentence than he otherwise would. Next one is Kim Fox. You mentioned her earlier, Chicago.
Kim Fox was the first Soros bought and paid for rogue prosecutor. They primaried her because she was the deputy chief of staff to the county maker, the person who made politicians, Tony Preckwinkle. And they primaried Anita Alvarez, a Democrat, female Latina, the first DA of Cook County who was a Democrat. Because why? She didn't bend a knee to BLM, and she didn't release the body camera video of the police shooting of Laquan McDonald fast enough. By the way, the mayor at the time was Rahm Emanuel, and he was fine with them not releasing it. But when they did release it, and they did prosecute the police officer for a bad shoot for murdering Laquan McDonald, it was too late. And so they got the Soros money. They primaried Anita Alvarez, and when you win the primary, you essentially win the election, which she did, and she's been there ever since. And by the way, in each of these 8 chapters on these 8 rogue prosecutors, Larry, crime exploded immediately when their policies took place. And that was before the pandemic. This started in 2015.
Is she the one who prosecuted the Jussie Smollett case?
Or I wouldn't call it prosecute, but she was the DA when that whole fiasco played out. And we tell these crime stories, many of which haven't been told in the press, in our book.
Next one is Larry Krasner in Philadelphia. He was impeached, but then the impeachment just went supernova.
Larry Krasner is a career criminal defense attorney, and we both know criminal defense attorneys who are terrific. I was one for a while. But he sued the Philadelphia Police Department dozens of times throughout his career as a criminal defense attorney. And then when he was elected with well more than $1 million of Soros cash, on the night he was elected at his election party, he called himself a, quote, public defender with power. The criminal element in Philadelphia called him Uncle Larry because he's so friendly to them. And so crime has exploded in Philadelphia. We have a chart in our book, and we've written about it at Heritage, that shows that there's murders at this level before he's elected, and all of a sudden, boom, it just explodes north. So it's now the carjacking capital of the United States, thanks to Uncle Larry.
Kimberly Gardner, St. Louis.
Kimberly Gardner, another Soros minion, propped into office with Soros cash. She's really probably the most incompetent of the 8 that we feature because she's absentee half the time. She goes on these junkets through a Soros front group called Fair and Just Prosecution, which of course is not fair or just. She has no management experience whatsoever. The police loathe her, just as they do in most of these other cities. We tell a story in our book about a case where there was a really bad career rap sheet dude, murderer, and the case falls through the cracks because she's so incompetent. She doesn't have her deputies have a stand-in prosecutor for the prosecutor who went on pregnancy leave. So bad that the judge ordered the bailiff to go to the office and grab a prosecutor and bring them into court, and it still didn't happen. But where's Kim Gardner? She's on some junket. So she's a disaster, and she's totally unqualified to be the DA.
Rachel Rollins, Boston.
So Rachel Rollins got a promotion because she was so bad at her job as the Boston DA. Joe Biden nominated her to become the U.S. attorney for the District of Massachusetts. And in her first tie-breaking vote, Vice President Kamala Harris had to swoop in at the last minute and cast the tie-breaking vote because every Republican and one Democrat voted against her to be confirmed. But she was confirmed. But she's famous because she listed on her website and in her Rollins policy memo, which you can still find on the internet, although they've tried to suppress it, 15 crimes you can commit in Boston, including possession with intent to distribute any drug. Fentanyl crisis, anybody? Breaking and entering, as long as the person is coming into your house to evade the cold or is tired. Assault on a police officer, almost all traffic offenses. The list goes on and on. And of course, to her credit, and I use a small c, she's probably the least bad of the 8 that we feature because she did cooperate with the U.S. Attorney's Office on major drug cases. Murders did not spike in her city like in the other cities, but she's still really bad.
Speaking of bad, that brings us to the aforementioned Chesa Boudin, San Francisco.
Yeah, Chesa Boudin is the son of the Weather Underground pair who were convicted in the Brinks bank robbery murder scheme. And when they went off to the Hooskow, he was raised by Bernadine Dorn and Bill Ayers, if you can believe it. And after law school, where he graduated from Yale, of course, he goes off and becomes a translator for Hugo Chavez. He's a public defender. He eventually runs for DA with the Soros money. He gets elected, and he continues the reign of terror that George Gascon had enacted. And we lay out in our book the number of rapes, murders, but mainly burglaries and commercial thefts that it just continued to explode under his reign. And it was so bad, Larry, so bad. Walgreens, of course, leaves downtown San Francisco because Chesa Boudin let people who stole less than $1,000 just walk out and never be prosecuted, that the liberal voters of San Francisco voted him out of office and recalled him, and they threw him out on this keister. That's how bad he was.
Do you have any idea, Cully, what he's doing now?
Well, I don't know, but I do know that publicly he stated that he was thinking about rerunning for the office, and then he later said he's not going to do that. But I suspect he's been paid by some liberal group and getting paid way more than he's worth to do basically nothing.
And by the way, you can steal under $1,000, not just per day, but per store until you get caught, if you get caught. And if you do get caught, they write you a ticket as a misdemeanor.
Correct.
And of course, we have cash with bail, so there's no chance you're going to jail.
Right. And then they give you a peer notice in court. And if you don't show up, who cares?
Who cares? Marilyn Mosby, Baltimore.
Yeah, so Charm City is the nickname for Baltimore, and the criminal element and others called it Charm City without the C. It became Harm City. She's infamous or notorious for having mishandled the Freddie Gray murder case against the police officers who died, who were involved in the arrest of him when he died in their custody. He charged them. She charged them. They were acquitted, or their juries were hung as she started to go through the stack of police officers. Eventually, she just dropped the last 2 cases. But the statistics of murders, carjackings, burglaries in Baltimore that went up immediately after she came into office are staggering. And we tell a story of a career criminal who robbed a store with a handgun, and he was convicted of that. And he gets, because of her office policies, probation before judgment. He goes on more of a crime spree in other counties in Maryland, picks up 4 more cases. They wanted to revoke his parole. They sent notice to Mosby's office. She does nothing, 0 about it. And then they find this guy down in Wicomico County, which is on the eastern shore of Maryland. The police officers go out to pick him up, and what does he do? He shoots and kills Sheriff's Deputy Glenn Hubbard, a father of 2, an African-American man of distinction. And now this guy, Austin Davidson, is awaiting trial. But for Marilyn Mosby, and but for all of these policies and these other chapters we have, these crimes would not have been committed.
And Cully, speaking of Charm City, at the time that Freddie Gray died in police custody, as you mentioned, you're talking about a city where the mayor was black, number 1 and number 2 people running the police department were black, city council, all Democrat, majority black, the state attorney who brought the charges against these 6 officers, black, 3 of the 6 officers black, a judge before whom 2 of them tried their cases, and by the way, found them not guilty, black, the city superintendent of schools, black, the county superintendent of schools, black, the then AG Loretta Lynch, black, and of course, the then president of the United States, Obama, black. So you have all these people running the city, running the place, and we're still talking about systemic racism. And I'm reminded, Cully, of that joke that Wanda Sykes once said when Obama got elected. She said, "How are you going to complain about the man when you are the man?"
Yeah, and of course there was a majority minority police department in Baltimore
Right.
at the time too, and so that dog doesn't hunt.
Last but not least, of course, is Alvin Bragg. And by the way, George Soros says he didn't give any money to Alvin Bragg.
Well, that's fancy footwork verbally, because the playbook and we have a chapter in the beginning, the origin, beliefs, and playbook of the rogue prosecutor movement is as follows, Larry. Back in 2015, they decided to go after and take out 3 pro-death penalty prosecutors in the South. Soros gives $500,000 to a PAC that was created for the purpose of recruiting and funding 3 challengers. They deploy that money to those challengers. Those challengers all win. They decide to go big. They figure out where they're going to do it. They install Kim Foxx through money that went to, guess, a PAC, actually 2 PACs in Illinois. So they set up these little PACs all over the country. And surprise, surprise, Larry, the money that goes to the PAC somehow finds the preferred candidate, and that candidate wins. And so technically, Soros did not hand the money to Alvin Bragg. No, he gives it to Color of Change, which is a PAC, a pro-criminal, anti-victim zealot organization. And surprise, surprise, over half of that money ends up helping Alvin Bragg and pushing Alvin Bragg as a candidate. I guess there's no coincidence at all, no connection whatsoever. But as we detail in a chapter that we have in our book on the money and follow the money, it is a system set up to be obscure. It is a system set up to have plausible deniability.
Right.
So when the Chesapeakeans and the rest of them policies start killing people, which is exactly what's happening, they can say, oh, no. But all of these push pieces, Larry, that are out there, including Glenn Kessler of the Washington Post, the fact checker, says that it's outrageous that Republicans say that. They don't mention the op-ed by George Soros in the Wall Street Journal a couple years ago saying why I support reform-minded prosecutors. So the man himself has said he does it. So there's 75 of these Soros rogue prosecutors around the country, and we started writing about this 3 years ago. I think we were a little bit ahead of the curve, and our timing just happens to be perfect. And thank you for tweeting out and helping us shed light on this really horrible, failed social experiment.
Well, unfortunately, your timing could not have been better. Rogue Prosecutors, How Radical Soros Lawyers Are Destroying America's Communities by Zach Smith and my guest, Charles Cully D. Stimson. And you can get the book, of course, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. You know where to find it. Cully, thank you very much for coming on. God bless.
God bless. Thank you.
Now, I know you like the show, so hit that like button, hit subscribe. We want to get our subscriptions up. And scroll down, get on our mailing list. That way you'll be able to get all of our videos, because every now and then, from time to time, YouTube has issues with our videos. To make sure you don't miss a single one, get on our mailing list. And you see that donate button? Hit that, throw a little something in the tip jar. Make sure we can continue giving you great, hard-hitting, candid programming. Finally, LarryWithEpoch.com, Larry with EPOCH.com. I'm Larry Elder. This has been the Larry Elder Show for Epoch Times. Remember, we've got a country to save. I'll see you next time.